Good evening to everyone. Good to see you here. I'm glad we can be together. I was wondering, as we begin tonight, does anyone want to try and say our theme verse, Proverbs 4 and verse 7? Who knows it? No, I don't want it up there. You got to say it without that.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all knowledge, and all our getting get understanding.
Well, that's close. That's close. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. And with all thy getting, get understanding. Yeah, that's right. All right. Okay. What about the next one? What was it? Proverbs 18:24? About a friend, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly, and there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. All right. All right. And then the next one, last week's, Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Okay, all right. And then Proverbs 14:34 for this week. Starts off with righteousness. Righteousness does what? Righteousness exalteth a nation, but you guys sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. All right, but sin is a reproach unto any people. Okay, keep working on those. Keep working on them. That's the purpose of Proverbs. That's why they're written the way that they are, so that we can get them in our minds. And so that they can be those little sayings that we hold on to, and that will help us as we make decisions, as we go through our lives, as we face challenges. This wisdom from above will be of a great, great help unto us. So we want to keep working on these things. Now, tonight, I'm going to talk about a couple of subjects, hopefully. Now, and I think that these subjects, well, there can be, I guess we might say, some hot issue subjects. We're going to talk about, hopefully we'll get to both of them, drunkenness and gluttony. All right? Probably haven't heard too much preaching on gluttony. All right? And I'm not going to preach about it a long time, because Proverbs doesn't say a great deal about it. But in both of these instances, we can see that we're given advice. We're given wisdom with how to deal with these things in the book of Proverbs. The first passage we're going to look at is Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 1. Proverbs 20 and verse 1. And the writer says there, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. What's that telling us? Wine is a mocker. All right, it does, doesn't it? It's going to alter your judgment. When you mock someone, what do? All right, you're teasing them, okay? Making fun, ridiculing. And wine is that. Wine will make you look silly. That's what he's saying. It's a mocker. And if you think, and this is what happens, people think, I can handle it, right? I'm the exception. I'm the one who will never cause a problem for. I can handle it. And if you think that, well, you are deceived. You're deceived. If you think it won't make you look foolish, if you think that it won't cause you to lose control, if you think it won't cause you to do things and think things and say things that you really never intended to do or think or say, you're only fooling yourself. If you think you can drink and keep it under control, keep yourself under control, you're just fooling yourself. That's what he's telling us here. Wine is a mocker. Strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. Not wise. All right, look at this. There aren't a great number of passages about alcohol or about drinking in Proverbs, but the ones that we do have really should cause us to think a great deal. Proverbs 23, beginning at verse 29. And this is about as good a description of someone who uses alcohol as you'll find anywhere. I mean, it's got it down to a T. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? That's what alcohol do to you. Don't you? I mean, we make fun of folks who try to talk when they are drunk. Foster Brooks was a comedian back in the 70s, probably the 60s and 70s. If you're a young person and you don't know him, look him up on YouTube sometime. He'll make you laugh your head off. It's my understanding he didn't drink at all. Does anybody else know that for sure? Okay, I thought he didn't drink, but he played like he was drinking. The funniest skit I ever saw him do was just this little thing with Dean Martin when he was a pilot. And he meets Dean Martin at the airport. And, Dean Martin asked him, what is it you do? And he said, I fly one of those, and Dean Martin said, a plane? He said, are you a pilot too? But anyway, we make kind of fun of the drunk trying to talk, trying to be eloquent. They mumble, they babble, they're incoherent. They have wounds. Alcohol brings your blood vessels closer to your skin. It makes it easier to get bruises cut up. They have them without cause. They don't know how they got them. And it'll give you red eyes. Also give you a red nose. Now you can get a red nose other ways, and red eyes too. I get them when the sun kills me. If I don't have sunglasses on and I'm out, you look at me at 7 o'clock that night and what's he been drinking? But I haven't been drinking anything. No alcohol, I mean. But anyway, that's some of the effects of alcohol. He says they that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder. That's a pretty fit description, isn't it? I don't know a great deal about drinking of alcohol, but from what I've seen on television, there's a lot of it displayed on television, in the movies and that kind of thing. But I guess a lot of that stuff really burns. They have to cut it with different things, whether it's water or Coca-Cola or that kind of thing, because that straight liquor it'll burn you up. And it stinks. I think of that when it talks about this way, besides the effects of it. Thine eyes shall behold strange women. I don't know why, but when I was reading that, I couldn't help but Mickey Gilley sang a song. I think it was Mickey Gilley. It was a song that said, the girls all look prettier at closing time. I think that's because of all the alcohol that's been consumed, But he says they will behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. You'll say things that you just never say if you were sober. They wouldn't come out of your mouth. And that's because alcohol takes away those inhibitors. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. You ever see a drunk try to walk a straight line? What kind of sobriety test do they give now? I know you have to blow into something, to try and to see what your blood alcohol is. You still got to walk? All right. Got to do. I think I saw one of those cop shows and they said you had to do the alphabet backwards. I think I'd struggle with that. I mean, I don't do that normally. Coordination is just way, way off because of alcohol in the bloodstream. It says in verse 35, they have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. People get, what do they call them? Beer muscles? Is that what they call them? Where they think they're ready to take on King Kong because they've, and they get hit and they didn't feel it, because of that alcohol. But they'll feel it soon enough. They have beaten me and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. I think it was Bill Cosby that talked about something about, did a little skit about going out and someone drinking so much and then they got sick and their best friend was this toilet in a bar. They were thanking the toilet for being so cold. They had their head up against it. And that was a good time. Went out for a good time. And they had their face in a strange toilet. And then at the end of all that, he said, I couldn't wait to do it again next weekend. That seems ridiculous. But didn't that just sum up so much of our world? And the use of alcohol in our world today? I mean, they had trouble with it back in the days of Proverbs here, days of Solomon, and we certainly have problems with it, and even more so today because we have distilled spirits, and those weren't around back then. And so the alcohol today is much higher proof, contains a lot more alcohol than they had back then. Okay? Lots more. All right? Proverbs isn't the only book that speaks about this. One more passage in Proverbs. It's Proverbs 31 and verses 4 to 7. And this is the advice that Lemuel's mother gives to him. Now, we remember Proverbs 31 mostly for the virtuous woman. That starts about verse 10. But she tells him this: it is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. What she's telling him is, you need to be sober-minded. We even have an expression in our world today, sober as a what? A judge. Sober as a judge. You don't want a judge who is under the influence of alcohol. You want him to make clear decisions. And that's what she's telling him. It's not for kings. It's not for leaders. It's not for those in authority. You need to be sober at all times. Now you think about that and look at our system today. I heard a long, long time ago that we talk about two parties in Washington. They said there's really three. There's the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and there's the cocktail party. And it has an influence on both those. She said in verse 6, give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink and forget his poverty and remember his misery no more. Now, she's not saying it's okay for those who aren't kings to drink. All she's telling us is that's who it does the drinking. And that's why they drink. They think they can drink to forget their misery and their sorrows. But folks, what happens when you sober up? Those sorrows and miseries are still there. And you might have more to deal with. And so you look at Proverbs and the writer there, he's pretty plain. We need to stay away from alcohol. That's what he's telling us. All right, now, again, he's not the only one that writes about this. Look in Isaiah chapter 5 and verses 11 and 12. Isaiah 5 and verses 11 and 12. Woe unto them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink, that continue until night, till wine inflame them, and the harp and the viol and the tambrette and pipe and wine and are in their feast, but they regard not the work of the Lord, neither consider the operation of His hands. It just consumes them. This search for alcohol from morning till the evening. Doesn't that sound like the alcoholic? Just can't get enough. Got to start the day that way, end the day that way, and that's the pursuit of the day. No thought toward the things of God. In Isaiah 28 in verse 7, but they also have erred through wine, and through strong drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up of wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. That's a pitiful condition. And these are supposed to be the religious leaders among God's people. And they are staggering because of alcohol. It was a problem for God's people. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verses 3 through 5 in the New Testament is going to tell us this. It's written to Christians. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. What he's saying is, people, we've lived like the world long enough. It's time for us to make sure that we're different. How do we do that? Well, he said we were, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries, wherein they think it strange that you run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you, who shall give account to Him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead. You think about that. How different are you viewed when you say, no, I don't drink? I don't drink. You know, some places that they're going to look at you funny. What do you mean you don't drink? You know, are you an alcoholic? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I just don't drink. And people think that that's so odd, because the idea is everyone does this. But we are called to be different. We're called to be different. Now, I want to talk just for a few moments here about something that I think is very interesting. I hope you find it interesting too. One of the things that people bring up when it comes to alcohol is the idea that, well, you know, they drank wine in the Bible, and so if they drank wine in the Bible, it must be okay for us to drink wine today. Well, I want us to understand a couple things. First of all, you need to know that the words that are translated wine in the Bible are generic. They are a broad heading, and they can mean several different things. They can mean the juice while it's still in the grape. They can mean grape juice, what we call grape juice, or they can mean alcoholic beverage. The context is what's going to tell you if it is alcohol that's being spoken of or if it's grape juice. All right? So you look at a passage like this, Isaiah 65 and verse 8. Thus saith the Lord, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and one saith, destroy it not, for a blessing is in it. So will I do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. Here he talks about that wine that's in the cluster. It's still in the grape. When they had butlers, when they had men who would be the person who served the king his wine, it was customary for them to bring a cluster of grapes, squeeze them into a glass, and give that to the king. But people see the word wine and they think that's our wine today. No, it's a generic term in the Scriptures. And so it may be very clearly grape juice that's being spoken of instead of alcohol, okay? So you got to look at the context. Another thing that people say is, well, you know, back then they didn't have refrigeration, and so if you had grape juice, it wouldn't be long until it turned to wine. And so it had to have alcohol in it. And that sounds pretty good to people. Oh yeah, they didn't have refrigerators. So, you know, they didn't have modern techniques. And so it all turned to wine. Well, do a little study sometime. I mean, it's not hard. All you got to do is ask Google, and it will, you know, how does grape juice become wine? And it'll go through the steps. It's not an easy process. It doesn't happen just, the temperature has to be just right. The yeast amount has to be just right. If you don't have them just right, it skips wine, it goes to vinegar. And you wouldn't want to drink it. Now, does anybody drink a glass of vinegar a day? I've known some people that do that. Rachel does. I thought I could smell something from over, but you know, and that's another issue. Anyway, all right. But you know, it's not something that just happens very easily, naturally. Now it can. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but here's the thing to keep in mind. They, speaking of the people of old, had several ways to keep grape juice from fermenting. Several ways. Here's a few of them. Number one, they would filter the juice through strainers and remove the protein. This would leave no yeast for fermentation. Number two, putting fresh juice in jars and sealing it with pitch, placing the jars in cool pools of water, and keeping the temperature at a certain degree so the yeast would not multiply. Number three, placing fresh juice in jars and burning sulfur dioxide over the jars. Number four, dried raisins, boiled then for the juice. And number five, boiling fresh juice down to a syrup called dibs. Later, they would dilute it with water and drink it as a beverage. Now, I haven't tried these things, and I don't know exactly how they work. I don't have to. Welch's does that for me, so I don't have to worry about that. But all I'm trying to show you is they knew how to keep grape juice. It didn't just ferment and you couldn't stop it. They could, and they did. I want to show you this from literature. Referring to reconstituting grape syrup to make grape juice, Aristotle, who was born around 384 BC, wrote, "The wine of Arcadia was so thick that it was necessary to scrape it from the skin bottles in which it was contained and to dissolve the scrapings in water." Well, that was one of the processes we talked about. Getting it down to a substance. I'm told that it would become something like the consistency of honey, something like that. And then they would add water with it and you could drink it. It would be a grape juice then. All right. The poet Horace, born in 65 BC, wrote, "There is no wine sweeter to drink than that of Lesbos. It was like nectar and would not produce intoxication." He called it wine, but it doesn't have alcohol in it. That's that generic term. But he speaks of how sweet it was. In the Mishnah, anybody know what the Mishnah is? It's a collection of Jewish traditions, okay? We know the Jews loved their traditions. Well, they had oral traditions, and finally they got around to writing them down, and that's the Mishnah. All right? It states that the Jews were in the habit of drinking boiled wine. What happens if you have alcohol in something and you boil it? It evaporates. I don't remember the exact temperature, but water boils at 212, and alcohol's like 170 something, 172 or something like that. Okay? But it boils. So they boiled it off. Naturally, this wine would be entirely free of alcohol as a result of the boiling, if not also from the manner of preservation. And so I hope that helps us to understand that just because people today say, well, grape juice, that just turns to wine, they couldn't stop it. Yes, they could. And yes, they did. In fact, this was the drink among the people. It was grape juice. Wine is what they called it. Now, I know that they had alcoholic wine as well. We read passages that speak of drunkenness and warn about consuming that kind of substance. So they had it. Who's the first person we ever read about getting drunk, by the way? Noah. Noah did after the flood. All right? But at any rate, you see these things, and I hope that it helps us to understand just a little bit better the world that they lived in and the situation. One of the problems that we run into, I guess anytime we study history, and Bible study, there's some history involved in that. And so when you do that, we kind of look at it through our 20th century glasses and think that everything back then it was just like it is today. And that's just not the case. It's just not the case. All right? Now, here's something else for us to think about when it comes to alcohol. A definition of intoxication: not having the normal use of mental faculties by reason of the introduction of alcohol into the body. When does this begin? With the first drink of alcohol, it begins to affect your brain. I like to tell people, and I know that a lot of them won't agree with me, but after your first drink, you are one drink drunk. All right? You're on your way. It's going to affect your brain, and it's going to do it pretty fast. All right? What does this say? Once in the bloodstream, alcohol crosses the blood-brain barrier and affects the brain. Alcohol moves through the body and absorbs into the bloodstream. Alcohol in the brain increases levels of feeling good, dopamine. The brain sends signals to increase heart rate and blood pressure. Most of the alcohol is absorbed through the stomach and the small intestine. On an empty stomach, alcohol can get to your brain in 1 minute. That's pretty quick. All right. Look at this next one, how it attacks the brain. First of all, alcohol affects the forebrain and assaults motor coordination and decision making. Number 2, then alcohol knocks out the midbrain, and you lose control over emotions and increase chances of a blackout. Number 3, finally, alcohol batters the brainstem as it affects heart rate, body temperature, appetite, and consciousness, a dangerous and potential fatal condition. The thing that saves most people from killing themselves with alcohol is that they black out before they can consume enough. That's the only thing that saves them. They wouldn't stop, but that saves them. Usually you pass out before you drink enough. If you're at that point and then all of a sudden, I guess you guzzle a whole bunch, it's really dangerous. And you hear every now and then of someone dying of alcohol poisoning, of too much alcohol in their system. But it works from the front to the back. And, think about this. Where are you? If you were to point to a place in your body, where are you? You close your eyes, Don't close them while I'm talking because you might not want to open them. But if you close your eyes, where are you? Are you in your elbow? Anybody feel like they're in their elbow? Or your kneecap? You're right up here, aren't you? I mean, you're right here. That's the front of your brain. That's the first thing that gets affected. Your thinking, your decision making. Alcohol is a depressant, but it also gives you these good feelings that make you, well, I guess think that you're more than what you are. You can do more than what you normally can. Look at this. This is incredible. The cost of excessive alcohol use in the United States in 1 year, $249 billion lost. That's a boatload, isn't it? All right. Here's another diagram that shows us this as well. And by the way, it cost every individual over $800. You don't drink, still costs you $800. Yeah, I came across this one too. It's shocking to me really in a way, but then it's not. It said 50% of high school seniors reported that they drank alcohol in the past 30 days. That's half. Half of our high school seniors. And look at this, our college students. 2 out of 5 college students report regular binge drinking. And 1 out of every 5 college students is considered a heavy drinker. That's alarming, isn't it? And, you think about that. Folks, we might look at this group and say, well, we don't have that problem. I've been around long enough to know, yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We may not know about it, but I'm sure that we do. And even if it's not one of us as individuals, it might be one of our children, we've got family members that are affected by this. I don't know any family that's not touched in some way by alcohol and alcohol abuse. I learned a long time ago I wasn't going to have anything to do with it. My grandfather always walked around with 2 canes. And the reason he walked around with 2 canes is he had broken one leg that was really bad. The other one he had lost. He came home drunk one night. And he was cold. And so he pulled up a chair to the fire, coal fire, that's what they used to heat the house. And he put his legs over the hearth. And he blacked out. My grandfather literally roasted his leg. They took him to the doctor the next morning. They drilled holes in his legs to try and get air to his leg so that it could heal. It didn't work, and they ended up having to take his leg. Didn't stop him from drinking. I don't have any memory of my grandfather when he's not drinking. I don't know why my dad doesn't drink. I mean, I know why now, but his brothers, most of them drank like fish. I'm just thankful that he never did. And I'm thankful that I don't have that problem either, because I can only imagine how addictive something like that could be. And there's real addiction there. And it's tough to overcome. Again, we just think, I can handle it. Look at this one. Up to 50% of all violent crimes and domestic abuse can be attributed to alcohol. People don't think right when they're drinking. That's the problem. Now, as Christians, folks, we got to stay away from it. Look at this. In Leviticus, we're running out of time real quick. I won't read this for you. Leviticus 10, 8, and 9. The priests were not permitted to drink wine or strong drink because they were leading in service and sacrifice to God. Well, folks, we are a royal priesthood. And we are offering sacrifice continually unto God. And if under the old law they couldn't, we shouldn't either. We shouldn't either. Now, I'll just leave you with one more verse, and that's the one we started with, all right? Proverbs 20 and verse 1. Remember, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. We can make wise decisions, and the wise decision is to say no to alcohol because we're following Christ. We don't want to be filled with that kind of spirit. We want to be filled with God's Spirit and serve Him faithfully. All right, we didn't get to the other. Let me, real quickly, here's your memory verse for next week. Proverbs 13:15. Good understanding giveth favor, but the way of the transgressors is hard. Appreciate it. You guys have a good week.